Welcome back. If you've been following along with this in-depth guide on how to build yourself a shiny new server that's secured and tuned for optimal WordPress performance, you might be thinking to yourself, well, what is next? Well, in this video, I'm going to outline a few tasks that need to be carried out on a regular basis. That means you're probably going to want to get out your calendar and set some reminders to ensure that your server continues to run securely and perform well in the long run. We're going to look at things like performing software updates, updating PHP, and a few gotchas you'll want to watch out for that we may or may not have experienced ourselves. First, let's get started with server monitoring. I'm using DigitalOcean, so monitoring server performance is a relatively simple process thanks to the built-in monitoring tools. If you're not using DigitalOcean, NetData is a great alternative, or you could use Pingdom server monitoring if you prefer not to host it yourself. If you are on DigitalOcean and you enable monitoring during droplet creation, then you're good to go. Otherwise, you'll need to install DigitalOcean's metrics agent manually. Once installed, you should see the droplet's current resource utilization when visiting the droplets dashboard. Next, let's talk about alert policies. Alert policies are extremely useful, and you should configure them for all of your droplets. Alerts reduce the need to manually check your server's health by sending you a notification when one of your chosen metrics reaches a certain threshold. To set up an alert in DigitalOcean, head over to the Monitoring tab and then click Create Alert Policy. Here you can create as many alert policies as you like. I like to set up alerts for my CPU, memory, and disk utilization with a threshold of 80%, which is a good starting point for most people. So what happens if you get a notification about high usage? A high resource usage alert can be the first sign that something is wrong with your server or the applications that it's running. To investigate, let's SSH into our server. We can run HTOP to have a look at the system resource usage in real time. If the alert that you're investigating was about high CPU usage, you can sort by CPU usage and see what's going on. Press F6. Choose %_CPU under the sort by column, and now we've segmented our server usage by CPU. Similarly, if you're investigating an alert about memory, you'll need to change the sort by column to memory. Again, we'll hit F6, choose %mem, and now we're sorting our server usage by memory. If Nginx or PHP appears at the top of the list, you should have a look at your access and error logs. If it's MySQL, you'll need to enable the slow query log. A much easier alternative is to use an application monitoring tool like New Relic. We were recently receiving a high CPU alert from our VPS provider. After performing some application monitoring using New Relic, we discovered that a database query was running slow, which caused MySQL to spike CPU usage. It turns out that we are missing an index in one of our database tables. Adding the index resulted in a big drop in CPU usage. That's all there is to server monitoring. Now on to maintaining your server. Let's start with an easy one that isn't just applicable to self-hosted WordPress installs. WordPress itself, WordPress themes, and all plugins should be regularly updated. No software is immune to vulnerabilities, and updating software will ensure that those inevitable vulnerabilities are patched. While you're at it, make sure to delete obsolete themes and plugins. There's no reason to keep them around other than to provide a potential entry point for malicious users. On top of that, the majority of premium plugins and themes won't receive updates via the WordPress dashboard if they're deactivated. For that reason, it's better to delete them than to leave them lying around. Another important task you have as a server administrator is to check to make sure that backups are running. It's inevitable that things will go wrong, and sometimes they go horribly wrong. Regular site backups are an integral part of disaster recovery. In the 5th video in this series, I demonstrated how to set them up. However, you need to ensure that they're running as expected months down the line. Earlier this year, we noticed that our site backups hadn't made it over to S3 for almost 2 months. The cause? Our backup script had stopped working due to a Python dependency issue. The moral of the story is to schedule a recurring time to verify that backups are being carried out. You should also periodically test the backups by importing the SQL into a test database to ensure that they're usable in case things were to go wrong. Next, let's talk about log files. Just like server monitoring, log files can help identify issues early and before they become catastrophic. Every once in a while, it's worth checking the logs to see if anything unusual is happening. You can concentrate on the following logs: Nginx error logs, PHP error logs, and WordPress debug logs. We use Papertrail to make it easier to monitor log files, especially the debug.log, which we have permanently enabled. What makes Papertrail ideal is that you can easily send certain logs to Slack. We have an alert configured for any fatal errors that occur. However, the log files themselves can become problematic if left unchecked. One downside to most VPS providers is that they provide very little disk space, which means the logs can quickly fill the server's storage. In the past, we've had servers completely fall over because the log file had grown to over 25 gigabytes. If I'd configured the server monitoring and periodically checked the logs, this wouldn't have been a problem. It's also worth enabling log rotation for log files in custom locations such as debug.log. If you followed along with this guide, you would have configured automatic security updates using unattended upgrades, which will apply security updates on a daily basis. However, it won't install general software updates that contain new features and bug fixes. When you SSH into your server, you'll often see the following. There are a bunch of updates that can be installed. Now, these packages won't automatically get updated because they don't contain security fixes. To run them, just type sudo apt update. Enter your password. Next, type sudo apt dist-upgrade. Hit yes. I recommend using apt-dst-upgrade versus the more common apt-upgrade because it will intelligently handle discrepancies. Before performing any upgrades, you should create a full system backup via your VPS provider. This is usually called a snapshot. Here it is in DigitalOcean. Now let's talk about PHP. The previous step is going to update PHP through your point release, or 7.3.0 to 7.3.11, but it won't upgrade PHP to a new major version like 7.4. Luckily, it's a simple process and possible with little to no downtime to upgrade PHP to a new version. If you're using Andre's PHP repository that we set up earlier in this series, you can safely install multiple major versions of PHP side by side, which we can use to our advantage. Now remember, in this series, we already set up PHP 7.4, so you don't need to do this if you've been following along. But if you have an older version of PHP and you want to upgrade, you can head over to the written version of the guide, and the command is right here. You'll copy this, paste the command into your command line, and next you should configure the new version of PHP as we demonstrated in the second video of this series. You'll also want to make sure to copy any modifications from your existing php.ini file found at ect/php/php version/fpm/php.ini and make those changes in the new version of the php ini file. At this point, you'll have multiple PHP versions installed, but Nginx will still pass requests to the older version. Now we need to update the site's configuration so that the fast_pass directive passes requests to PHP 7.4. Let's open up our site's configuration file. Navigate to your site's available folder. Here's the path. Then type sudo nano, the name of your site. Scroll down until you see fastcgi_pass space Unix, and you want to update this so that it's the correct version of PHP that you want to be running. You can see mine's already running PHP 7.4. The exact command that you need is over in the written version of this guide. Of course, because we've made changes to our configuration, we need to test things before restarting Nginx. Sudo nginx-t. If you get a successful message, go ahead and restart Nginx. Sudo service nginx reload. To make sure that your upgrade worked correctly, or even just to find out what version of PHP you are running, you can visit Site Health under Tools in your WordPress dashboard. Tools, Site Health, click on the Info tab, go down to Server, and here you can see the PHP version. Once you confirm that this is working on a single site on your server, you should go ahead and repeat the process for each site on your server that you want to upgrade. Ideally, you'll perform these changes on a staging site and then test the critical paths before updating any production sites. Once you're happy that everything is working as expected, you can remove the old versions of PHP using a simple command. The command is right over here in the written version of the guide. Just go ahead and copy this and paste it into your command line to remove the old version. So what about updating Ubuntu itself? Ubuntu releases a new LTS version every 2 years. The most recent version is 20.04, called Focal Fossa. Should you update to a new LTS version as they're released? It's a question often debated, and you'll get very different recommendations depending on who you ask. Personally, as we mentioned in the previous video, I don't ever upgrade a server's operating system. An OS upgrade can be a slow process to complete. Think about the last time you updated your computer to a new major version of macOS, Windows, or Linux. During that time, your sites will be completely inaccessible. There's also a good chance that some existing server packages won't be compatible with your new OS, which can further increase the downtime as you scamper to rectify such issues. A much safer approach is to spin up a fresh server. Doing so allows you to test that everything is fully working as expected. A clean slate is also an excellent opportunity to reassess if your current setup still meets your needs or if a different server stack might be more suitable. You can safely try these changes without impacting your live sites. Once you're happy with the new setup, you can switch your DNS over with minimal downtime. All right, so we need a system, an action plan to make sure that our sites are monitored and maintained. I've covered the various tasks that should be carried out over your server, but how regular should these tasks be performed? I would recommend that you perform the following once a month, which shouldn't take more than 30 minutes. First, perform WordPress updates, including themes and plugins. Next, ensure backups are running and that they're usable. Then, check your server metrics to make sure that there aren't any unusual spikes. Next, quickly scan your server's error logs for problems. And finally, update server packages. As for updating to a new version of Ubuntu, you should definitely be aware of the end of life date for the version you're running. At that point, there will be no further updates released of any kind, including security updates. You should definitely move all of your sites to a fresh server and decommission that old server before that date. Typically, this is going to be about every 2 years, generally after the LTS release. That's all for this video. In the next video, you'll be able to snag a complete set of the Nginx configuration files for WordPress that we've been using throughout this video series. I'll see you there.